Welcome to the City on a Hill Weekly Roundup podcast. My name's Steven.
And my name is Cam.
Welcome to the podcast this week. You may notice there is no Matt today. Matt is homesick playing producer, and so we are getting high tech. We are doing this thing from multiple locations. The
That's right.
most professional, non-professional podcast that you will listen to.
We like to think of ourselves as the best show in town.
We are the best show in town. So if you are ranking your City on a Hill Weekly Roundup podcast, we are number one on that list.
And not that it's a competition, but it kind of is.
But it's always a competition. Like my whole thing is like when I was a kid is like if we're keeping score, we're competing.
That's right.
And if you know me, that is very much my personality. So, well, Cam, how was your weekend?
My weekend was great. It was a birthday weekend, so very exciting. We went to a restaurant Saturday night, Carissa and myself. She took me there, and I got a delicious steak with prosciutto wrapped shrimp on top. Talk about a combo.
That is a fantastic combo. Now, here is the question of all questions, and this should have come up in your church planning residency interviews, is how do you like your steak cooked?
You know, this may surprise you. It may not, but I try to play it safe with a medium.
Okay.
Steak.
That's acceptable. If you just said well done, I was like,
yeah,
that could be a game changer. It might be a deal breaker.
Right.
I'm a medium rare guy. I really like medium rare, but yeah, I can understand medium's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, I'm like, what are we doing? But
what are we doing? I mean, it's charcoal at that point.
Exactly.
So.
I remember as a kid, we would go to a place called Quincy's. Not Quincy like here, but Quincy's, and it was a kind of a bargain steakhouse type place, and I would get a sirloin, and back then it was like $3, and I would get it well done, and it would be like eating a hockey puck, chewing saddle leather. It was not that I've ever tried to chew saddle leather, but I'd imagine that's what chewing saddle leather was like.
I'm sure that's probably exactly what it's like.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So good birthday.
Good birthday. Great birthday. Got to celebrate it on the 9th with our church family.
That's right. So. Yes. And I know you did a great job on Sunday. Did an amazing job. And I was out of town. Thanks for serving our people while I was out of town. So kind of a neat story. And this is where I just really love the kingdom of God is Cam and I and Amy were down at one of our mission partners a couple weeks ago, Shades Mountain Baptist Church, and for a conference there. And one of the things I really enjoy a lot about those conferences are the friendships that we get to build with other church planners and missionaries. And so I've gotten to know Garrett Rayburn, who's in New York City and Brooklyn over the last several years. And he's been planting about the same amount of time as we have. And so we kind of are trekking the same pathway and seeing a lot of the same hurdles and milestones and issues you see at a church of our size and our age in a city. And so we've just become good friends. And he had mentioned that his daughter was having surgery this past Monday, and Cam happened to be preaching the following Sunday. And I was like, man, let me just come preach for you. And so it worked out really well for me to go down to New York City and to be able to preach for him. And so Cam, thanks again for stepping in.
Totally. And, I heard on top of the blessing of being able to fill in, you also had a great steak. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was incredible. So I told Garrett, I said, hey, man, like, I know your daughter just had surgery. No need to entertain me. I can entertain myself. I'll figure out what to do. I'll go find somewhere to eat. He said, no, man, let's hang out. And so we ended up hanging out, and he had mentioned one place, but when he found out where I was staying, he said, no, we're going to Peter Luger. And so the only thing I know about Peter Luger is that Andy Mineo mentions Peter Luger as a steakhouse in one of his songs. And so I was like, this place has got to be great. But Peter Luger is a famous steakhouse in Brooklyn, one of the best in New York City. But what's neat about Peter Luger is that it's not a very pretentious steakhouse. It's like going into a bar. It's loud. The waiters are not like super friendly. They're nice, but they're not like going out of their way like you would at like a nice fine dining restaurant. You're not like talking hushes and whispers. And seriously have one of the best steaks I've ever had in my life. Top 2, top 3. And what they do is they bring out on the menu, it says steak for 1, steak for 2, 3, 4. And they just bring out a big family style steak. And it was unbelievable. So
it's delicious.
I'm just thankful they had an 11 o'clock service, because if I would have had to get up, it would have been very difficult for me to do that and preach the next day early. So it gave me some time to digest the steak. So it was a good time.
There you go. Well, I am sure glad that steak could stand on its own and you guys got to enjoy it.
It was a good time. It was a good time. The weather was, it was rough, but it was a good time. Got back. I feel like, my family, half the church, like there's some sickness is going around all over New England, and so everybody I know seems to have it. I know, Cam, you mentioned your family has some sickness.
That's right. That's right. I've avoided it so far. One of our solutions is taking ACV, apple cider vinegar shots.
Okay.
It is not very tasteful, but it seems to work. So I'm just going to keep doing it and see what happens.
Apple cider vinegar is like it's like a wonder. It's like people put it in their hair, do all sorts of stuff.
I'm not that crazy, but maybe I should be.
Yeah, it was it was a good time. So, well, hey, here's what's coming up in the next couple of weeks at the church. Coming up next Friday on the 21st, we have our next night of prayer and worship. This is a great time to get together with the church body and intentionally focus on just that, prayer and worship. And so we really do want to take time as a congregation to cry out to the Lord, to share our hearts before the Lord, to ask God to move in our body, in our city. And I know, Cam, you had said last time when you got, one of the first things you did when you moved here was a prayer night. And so tell me maybe a little bit about how that impacted you and what you enjoyed from that.
Yeah, I think when we think about prayer, we often, I think, gravitate towards thinking about it in a personal, kind of private sense, which sure is a significant part of prayer. Jesus even talks about us praying in secret to the Father. But there's also this beautiful dimension where, as children praying to the Father, we get to do so as siblings, praying to our Father, and we get to do so corporately. And Pastor Matt and our worship leaders do an excellent job at leading us to that end, week in and week out in service through different liturgy, but then also through these quarterly worship nights. And I know the first time I went was back in the fall, and I was just truly blessed. Sometimes I find that I need help being led to even know what to pray. And to know how to vocalize some of the things that I'm feeling, but don't necessarily know how to put words to. And that's why an opportunity like this is particularly important. And I mentioned actually on Sunday, but in Daniel, we see the importance of mourning and crying out to the Lord in the midst of difficulty. And that's exactly what we're going to do, is experience the grace of crying out to the Lord even when it's hard in this worship night.
That's so important. And I think one thing we do as a church a lot is responsive readings and like led prayers, like pre-read prayers. And part of the reason we do that is we live in a world that there's so much information. We have information overload. We have social media constantly. We have more information than any generation in human history. And instead of actually informing us, it overwhelms us. And so I do believe that we need words to pray at times. And when we can borrow the words of others, guiding us and leading us in prayer, it definitely helps shape our prayers to be Christ-centered, our prayers to be dependent and longing after God to work in us. And so that's great. It's a great point.
And we have the Daniel Q&A coming up. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the Daniel Q&A coming up next Sunday on the 23rd. We've been in the book of Daniel since October. And it's been a great series, but as we talked about at the beginning of Daniel, you kind of have a book in two parts. You have like almost like a geopolitical drama playing out at the first part, and then the back part gets weird. There's all sorts of prophecies, and it stretches you as a teacher of the Bible. But as you're reading it, sometimes you can get lost a little. You can lose the plot a little. You can lose the forest for the trees. And so what we want to do is we want to just create some space, which we often do at the end of sermon series, to just ask questions. And so we would invite you to bring those questions along. And so you can, if you look on the screen right now, you can see a way to register for that event. And in that event, there's a phone number that you can text your questions into prior, if you're already thinking about them, so that we can be prepared to answer those questions for you. And so would encourage you to come. There's free pizza as well. So if that's what gets you there,
I'm definitely coming.
I'm in. Domino's. I got 4 kids. This is how we're doing lunch that day.
Come on now.
We're balling on a budget. Let's go. So it'll be a good time. And then coming up on Friday the 28th, we have 2 events. We have our newcomer dinner. So if you are new to City on a Hill and just want to get to know some people, it's a great way to do that. You can register for that. And then as well, if you've been around a little while and you're ready to take the next step towards membership, come to our membership class, and we'll have dinner that evening. Childcare is available, and we'll be able to talk through, what we believe as a church, why we're here, what makes us distinct as a church, and then how God is using City on a Hill to help reach Boston. And so I would encourage you to come to any of those. Again, any of those events you are interested in, scan the QR code on the screen or go to coahforesthills.org/events.
That's great. That's great.
So today we have a special guest, as I mentioned, Cam. There's no Matt, and so I feel like this was a really good opportunity for us to interview Cam. And so if you've been around City on a Hill for the last year or so, you've heard a lot about Cam. We prayed for Cam and Carissa for almost a year as they were preparing to move to Boston. They got here to Boston, started our residency in September, and we've had opportunities to hear from Cam in the pulpit and hear from Cam and Carissa up front. And so this is just another way that we want to give them an opportunity to just share a little bit of the journey. Like how are things going? How are they doing personally? And so, one thing I mentioned, Cam, when you were praying about coming to Boston was I said, and I learned this from Sean Sears, who's the pastor at Grace Church. So I got to give credit. Um, he said, plant your family, plant yourself, and then plant the church. And so how do you feel like that process so far has gone of you and Carissa planting roots here as a family, and then
Right.
you personally planting yourself in the city of Boston? How's that gone so far?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of wisdom to that saying that we've experienced over the last 6 or 7 months. I think one of the big things is it just takes time to adjust to new rhythms, both work, traffic, commuting, having one car. It takes time to do things like get your mass license plate,
Yep.
get your license, change over insurance. There's just a lot of stuff that we don't always think about until we have to do it.
Yeah.
And I know for us, it's just been really helpful to just kind of settle in, learn the city. We've spent a lot of time in Dorchester and Lower Mills because that's where we hope to be long term, and just kind of learn the restaurants and learn the rhythms, learn the parks, and walk around and get to know people. But then also, one of the things that's been really significant is honestly just settling into life here at the church.
Mm.
Oftentimes, when when we think about living life for Jesus, sometimes we neglect that we continue to live our life with Jesus. And it could be easy for us to come here and to not even be thinking about
Mm.
how are we going to continue growing as Christians? How are we going to stay healthy? But to be able to land with City on a Hill, to have the intentional guidance and leadership of yourself and the other
Mm.
elders, and to have the relationships with this church family has really helped us to continue to grow in our walk with the Lord,
Mm.
to continue to grow in community with others. I was just at my community group last night and was really helped just by the discussion and time of
Mm-hmm.
prayer we had. I often think of an illustration where if your goal is to get to the top of the ladder, you can try to get up it as quick as possible, but if it's leaning against the wrong wall, it's not going to help you.
Mm.
So before you start climbing the ladder, you want to make sure it's leaned up against the right wall.
Yeah.
And for us on our church planting journey, we are deeply burdened for the sake of the gospel going forth here in the city. And that could lead us to kind of climb up the rungs of the ladder as quickly as possible to start a new church. But this time period has really been helping us to make
Mm.
sure that ladder is leaned up against the right wall,
Yeah.
and to be intentional in that process.
Yes. It's amazing how when if you're driven, like you don't want to plant a church unless you're driven. Like
Right.
you have ambition. Like you want, like, church planters have a drive to do things for the Lord and to take new ground. But sometimes we forget to just be human and
Mm-hmm.
let being lead to doing,
That's
and
right.
I think when you move to a new place like Boston, it takes a while. It takes a while to find your footing. I mentioned, I think before you guys moved here, I said, it's going to feel like you're underwater for about 3 months
Yep.
and you're just treading water. And all of a sudden one day you kind of pop your head above the water and you're like, oh, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, I know where the
Yeah.
grocery store is.
That's right.
I've found my rhythms. I've found my people. And
That's
so,
right.
yeah, I'm glad that you've taken the time to do that. And I think it served
Mhm.
you well. It served our church well.
Yeah.
The more that we're able to do that, we are always wanting to move faster than the Lord, right?
Mhm.
And the Lord is doing
Mhm.
so much work in us, and
Yeah.
these times like this are so formative in that.
Yes.
So maybe what's one big win that we can celebrate, kind of related to church planting? Could be
Mhm.
core team, could be funding, could be anything. Like what's the thing you're celebrating?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of little wins that kind of combine together to be a big win. I think the first thing that comes to mind is core team. We're starting to see uh, a significant group of individuals from outside of Boston who are very interested in or even starting to make plans to move here, join this church body sitting on a hill, and be a part of helping a new church start in Dorchester.
Mhm.
But then also, we're very, very, very initially just praying that the Lord would do that even here in the city, amongst our church body and other churches here. So that's been exciting to see some more movement there.
Mhm.
We actually had some people visit just a few weeks ago to check out the city, to check out the church, and we have some more coming out in another few weeks. So that's just been a really neat
Yeah.
part. We love to do things not alone but together,
Mhm.
and together with one another, and that's a beautiful thing. As far as funding's concerned, God's been really faithful to provide.
Mm.
We just crossed the kind of the threshold of about 60% in terms of our fundraising, which is a really significant milestone for
Mhm.
us, and one that we are just kind of in awe of the Lord, just bringing churches and individuals into our partnership team that we would have never expected, or
Mhm.
that we weren't sure, like, what would materialize and what wouldn't. So yeah, God's been really good to us.
That's so great. And it's amazing how the Lord stretches you through both of those.
That's
As you're
right.
building a team, you are you could imagine, like, if you ever watch an old Western where the wagon is just careening toward the edge of the cliff, right?
Mhm.
Church planting feels like this. So for those of you wanting to plant a church one day, it just feels like you're going to fly off a cliff.
Oh
But
no,
you're just praying that enough road gets built out ahead of you
that's right.
that you're not going to actually go off the cliff, but you're going to cross the
Yes,
cavern.
yes.
And in the same way with church planting, with gathering a core group and fundraising,
Hmm.
you're just constantly working to build a little more track ahead of you.
Right.
And so it takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of guts and courage to say, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to step into something that's unknown, and we're going to
Hmm.
call people to something that's unknown.
That's right.
And so, but we trust that we have a God who loves our city and loves his church and wants to
Yes.
see the gospel move forward way more than we do. And
Yes.
that's a great comfort to us, that as we work hard, we can lay our head down at night and trust the work to the Lord. Just like the
Hmm.
farmer who plants the seed,
Yeah,
trust that the growth is going to come.
that's
The
right.
Lord is the one who gives the growth. So excited to see how God's working that. What's one big prayer we can be praying for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, we, in light of that illustration, feel really needy for the Lord to keep laying down the road.
Hmm.
So prayer is one of the ways that He does that, that He provides and He works. And for us, if you could just pray, one of our big goals this year is to just really get to know the people in the place of Lower Mills, and
Hmm.
to spend time there, to build relationships there, to be able to understand the beautiful things about the community, and also maybe some of the harder things and the needs of the
Hmm.
community. And that takes time. It takes intentionality. It takes wisdom. Even a sensitivity to the Spirit's leading. If you could just pray that we would just be all in on that.
Hmm.
And God has already helped us so far to just grow in our love for our city and for our community. But if you could just pray that this year would be a year where we see some significant progress there.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. No, we're certainly praying, and for you as you're listening, there are a few ways that you can be a part of this. One is pray for Cam and Carissa, pray for their core group, pray for their funding,
Mhm.
pray for the Lord to do more than they could ever possibly imagine.
Yeah.
We are completely helpless unless the Lord moves, unless the Lord works, and so so you can pray. You can share this as well, so you can share the need. So if you know somebody who lives in that area, you have a friend or a family member, or somebody who might be willing to invest in what they're doing, man, share their contact info. Like grab, you can email us, you can text us. You can do all those different things, and we can help get the information to Cam and to Carissa. But also, the Lord might be calling you to go. He might be putting your yes on the table, and so be willing to be sensitive to that. And if you live in Dorchester, you live Lower Mills, you live in that area, prayerfully consider going. Take a step of faith.
Mhm.
Um, And then also maybe you want to take a step further than that. Maybe you don't live in an area, but maybe you just feel really burdened to be a part of a new church plant.
Yeah.
Maybe pray about moving into that area. Commit some time to live
Mm.
there for a few years and just help this church get started. We do believe that as we give ourselves away as individuals and as a church, that Jesus gives us our lives and He builds His kingdom.
That's
And
right.
so, would encourage you to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Cam, thanks for today, man. We're so thankful to have you here. I always say that the sign you have good church planting residents is that you don't want them to leave, and so you feel a little bit of that tension, like Paul had in Acts 20,
Yeah.
where the Ephesians were sending him in tears. And I know here in about a year and a
Mm.
half, we're going to be sending you because we
Great.
like you so much, and you and Carissa so much,
Mm.
but we're also excited to see the gospel go forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, me and you both. And a sign of a good church that you're a part of is that
Mhm.
you don't want to
Right,
leave it
right,
either.
yeah, yeah.
So we'll have mutual mourning, but also mutual joy at the same
Exactly.
time.
And
So
the beauty of it is that we're only a couple miles down the road. So I mean, Boston's a
that's right.
small city, but there's over 100,000 people who live in that neighborhood who have very little access to the gospel. There are some
Mhm.
gospel preaching churches there. There's just not enough, and so we want to keep planting churches in our city and in our region, so that
Mm.
we can saturate our city, saturate Greater Boston, so that every man, woman, and child can have repeated opportunities to hear the gospel.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
Cam,
great.
thanks for being with us today. Thanks for filling in for Matt. There's only one Matt Waldrop, but there's also only one Cam Sardano. So thanks for being
There
here.
you go. Big shoes to fill, but glad to be here this morning.
That's true. That's true. Well, let me send you all with this benediction from Ephesians 3, and I think this is just a very apropos benediction for today and for Cam. Is this from Ephesians 3:20 through 21? Now to Him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to Him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus through all generations, forever and ever. Amen. You guys have a great day.
Take care.